My son drained my bank account and took his wife and her mother to Rome. I just smiled to myself, and 3 days later, he called me sobbing. Mom, what did you do? My retribution was complete. The day I needed to breathe the most was the very day my son took every single dollar without even leaving a note. Eleanor Ellie Price froze for a long time. She sat on her old, worn cloth armchair, the same one she bought when Jackson turned 7, using the first decent paycheck she earned cleaning homes in the Hollywood Hills. In front of her, the cell phone screen glowed with a notification that chilled her blood. Available balance, $0. She read it again and again, and a fourth time. Her hands trembled. Not from old age, though she was 68 years strong, but from something deeper, a sickening knot that forms when the soul understands, but the heart refuses to accept. She called the bank. A robot answered. Then a human representative tried to ask questions. They told her the movements had been made online, wire transfers for large amounts totaling over $80,000. It was her entire life's work, her savings, her security, her only safety net. And where did the money go? She asked, her voice broken, as if she knew the answer, but needed to hear it from someone else. It was all transferred to an account in the name of Jackson Arthur Price. Ma'am, the executive replied indifferently. Do you want to file a fraud report? Ellie didn't respond. She hung up without saying a word. Silence filled the house. The only sounds were the ticking of the clock in the kitchen and the buzz of a dying fluorescent light bulb. Outside, the ice cream truck played its familiar tune, oblivious to the abyss that had just opened inside her. Then the landline rang, the old phone she kept out of habit. Hello? She said, her voice flat. Ellie, honey, did you see your Jackson's Instagram? It was the excited voice of Doris, her longtime neighbor. He's in Rome, child, eating fancy food with his wife and mother-in-law. Lord, what a life they live. They look like movie stars. Ellie swallowed hard. Her soul seemed to leave her body for an instant. She walked slowly to her room, opened the drawer where she kept her old smartphone, and searched for her son's profile. She wasn't big on social media, but she followed him from a distance like someone peering through a window at a life that no longer belonged to them. There he was, Jackson, her only son, the boy she brought into the world with pain and raised alone since his father left her for another woman. The same son she gave everything to, even the family land her parents left her so he could go to college. He was smiling, a glass in hand, dressed in a crisp white shirt, embracing Tanya, his wife, and Rhonda, the mother-in-law who always looked down her nose at Ellie. The photo caption read, Rome, my new beginning. I deserve this. And in the comments, Tanya had written, Good things come to those who wait. Thanks for everything, Mom-in-law. With a money emoji, Ellie didn't cry. She didn't scream or break anything. She just stood there, holding the phone like a burning brick. Then, without anyone to notice, she smiled. But it was a different kind of smile, as if she finally understood something she had avoided seeing for years. Far away, under a cloudy sky and among the cobblestone streets of Rome, Jackson raised his glass without guilt. See? Tanya said, sipping expensive wine. It was a good idea to take the money. She's going to die soon anyway. Better we use it before it goes to medical bills. Rhonda, her mother, let out a harsh laugh. Clueless old lady. She doesn't even know what a plane is. She was never going to do anything useful with that cash. Jackson didn't say anything. He looked at the Colosseum with shining eyes. But something was churning inside him. But he kept quiet, just as he had learned to do since he was a boy and was hungry. And his mother would tell him, "Hold on, baby. We'll have it tomorrow." The walls of Ellie's house seemed older that night. Everything was in its place, but nothing felt the same. On the shelf were photos of Jackson, small, in preschool, in his first middle school uniform, the day he received his college diploma. Everything she had done, she did for him. At 18, she sold her engagement ring to pay for his high school. At 23, she gave him the family land her daddy left her. At 30, she helped with the wedding expenses, even though Tanya never cared for her. Ellie cooked for him, washed his clothes, and cleaned up after him, and he only drifted further away. "Mom, you don't understand this world," he'd say dismissively. "Things aren't done like they used to be. Tanya and I have big plans, and son, I'm part of those plans. You'll always be in my heart, Mama, but you can't be tied to me for life." A week before discovering the betrayal, Ellie had tried to visit Jackson at his apartment in Studio City. She brought a tray of her famous fried chicken and collard greens that she made herself. She rang the bell. No one opened the door. She waited under the sun, sitting on a bench for 2 hours until the doorman approached her. "Are you looking for Mr. Jackson Price?" "Yes, I'm his mother." "Ah, well, I was instructed not to let you in if you come unannounced." Ellie swallowed. "And why is that I couldn't tell you, ma'am?" "But that's what they told me." She walked back home. She didn't take the metro bus. She wanted the air to hit her face, even if it was hot and dirty. She thought of every meal she denied herself, every dawn she worked overtime, every penny she saved for her son. That same night, Doris came to visit. She brought pecan pie and coffee. "You've always been strong, Ellie. Don't let this break your heart. Jackson is young. Maybe he'll come to his senses." Ellie sighed, her gaze distant. "Do you think children ever regret it?" Doris: "Yes, of course they do. When their mother isn't around, they realize everything. Well, I hope it's not too late when he realizes." "And what are you going to do?" Ellie looked up. In her eyes was something different, something that hadn't been there before. "I'm going to smile just like they taught me." Doris frowned. "Smile? What do you mean? I've cried enough." "Doris? Now I'm going to smile in silence because I have nothing left to lose. And when a woman has nothing left to lose, she becomes dangerous." Meanwhile, night was falling in Rome. Jackson was stepping out of the shower when he heard Tanya's voice on the balcony speaking on the phone. "Yes, we did it. The old lady never even knew. The money's here. Tomorrow we open the account in Spain and we get rid of Jackson." "Yes, of course. He thinks we're in this together." "Such a fool." Jackson stopped. He didn't move. He felt the water freeze on his skin. He didn't say anything. He went back to the room as if he hadn't heard a thing. He lay down next to Tanya, who pretended to be asleep. He closed his eyes, but something had changed. and he didn't know yet that the worst was coming. Back in South Central Los Angeles, Ellie was preparing a cup of chamomile tea. The night was thick. The streetlights flickered. Outside, dogs fought over a trash bag. Inside, she picked up her notebook, the one she used to jot down recipes she never got to cook. She wrote something with her shaky handwriting. "This is not the end. It is the beginning of my silence, and my silence will hurt more than any scream." Then she closed the notebook, lay down in bed, and for the first time in a long time, she slept without tears. And while she slept in her humble home, her son, in a hotel suite in Rome, checked his phone. He found a bank notification, account blocked due to suspicious activity. "What?" he muttered, staring at the screen. The first crack had just formed, and Jackson didn't know that his mother, in silence, had already begun to move. Sometimes pain doesn't scream. Sometimes pain sits, observes, and waits for the right moment. And that moment was just beginning. The night hadn't entirely left South Central. There was still that sticky humidity between the tin roofs and the broken sidewalks. Ellie got up at dawn, her bones creaking as they did every day. But this time, she didn't feel old. Something new was beating inside her. It wasn't rage or sadness. It was a determination her soul had never known before. While heating water on the gas stove, she stared at the blue flame. The whistle of the steam took her back many years to the first day she knew what it was like to be alone. She was 14 when she started cleaning houses in the Brentwood neighborhood. A girl with badly braided hair, dark skin, and hands cracked by cheap soap. By that age, she knew the names of all the stain removers and how to fold a boss's shirts without wrinkling them. At night, when she returned home, her mother no longer waited up for her. She was already asleep. Her absent father had left with a woman from a bar. Ellie didn't cry. She just swallowed, and the next day woke up before the rooster crowed to go back to work. At 17, she got pregnant with Jackson. His father was a boy 3 years older than her. He promised they would marry, that he would get her out of that life. They lasted 8 months. The day he found out the baby was a boy, he disappeared. He left with a woman who sold cosmetics and never returned. Ellie didn't cry. She just clenched her jaw, adjusted her scarf, and went out to look for more houses to clean. She raised Jackson alone, carrying him on her back while she washed other people's clothes. When he started walking, she taught him to play with detergent caps as if they were toy cars. They had no toys, but they had stories. No refrigerator, but they had hot soup. No television, but they had songs she sang to him until he fell asleep. He was her whole world. When Jackson turned 6, one of Ellie's clients offered to pay for his elementary school tuition at a private school if she agreed to work full-time and live in. Ellie didn't think twice. She left her house, lived on the patron's rooftop apartment, and every weekend she crossed the city to see her son. She never arrived empty-handed. Sometimes a new notebook, sometimes just a snack, but always with a heart ready to listen to whatever Jackson wanted to tell her. Years passed, and Jackson grew up. Ellie struggled to learn how to write her signature, her hand trembling just so she could enroll him as the responsible party on school papers. She learned to read doctor's prescriptions and then bank statements. She couldn't write well, but she understood enough not to let herself be pushed around, or so she thought. At 16, Jackson told her, "Mom, When I make it big, the first thing I'll do is buy you a house where the cold doesn't seep through the walls." And she replied without hesitation, "Don't buy me anything, son. Just don't forget me." Then came college. Ellie sold the only land her father left her, a patch of earth in rural Georgia, where she had always dreamed of building a small cabin. She sold it for less than it was worth because Jackson needed to pay the enrollment fee. And as always, she didn't hesitate. "My son is going to be an accountant," she proudly told her neighbors. "He's going to get out of this life." And he did get out, but not as she imagined. It was in his 3rd semester that he met Tanya, a girl with straight hair, long nails, and a magazine smile. From the first time Ellie saw her, she felt a pang in her stomach. Not from jealousy or envy, but because this woman had the look of someone who only knew how to take, never to give. Tanya came from a family that pretended to have more than they did. Her mother, Rhonda, wore knockoff designer clothes and spoke as if she had studied in Europe. The first time they visited Ellie's house, they discreetly twisted their mouths. "What a lovely color, the walls are very rustic," Rhonda said with a sarcastic tone. Tanya, seeing the kitchen, made a comment in a low voice that Ellie would never forget. "I don't know how Jackson grew up here. This looks like a shelter, not a home." Ellie smiled as always, but something broke inside her. Years passed, and Tanya gained ground. First, she asked that Ellie not visit so often, then that she not voice opinions on their decisions, then that she not attend certain family events because she didn't fit in. Jackson, confused and lovesick, slowly distanced himself. One night, already living with Tanya, Jackson visited his mother. It was the last time he did so without warning. She prepared him pot roast and gravy, his favorite meal. "Mom, Tanya says you're too involved in our lives, that you don't let us grow as a couple. I just want you to be happy, son," Ellie said, watching her food grow cold. "I don't need you to take care of me anymore," he replied, as if that hurt her. "I'm a man now, and men forget who made them men." Ellie didn't cry. She just got up, cleared the table, and told him to take the rest of the roast with him. The following months were a parade of subtle dismissals. Tanya began managing Jackson's finances, convinced him to change bank accounts, and asked him not to tell his mother everything. According to her, Ellie was a limited woman who wouldn't understand modern life. Jackson, wrapped up in a mixture of ambition and emotional manipulation, agreed. Ellie began to notice things. A bank receipt that didn't match, a statement that never arrived, a life insurance policy she didn't remember authorizing. That's when she decided to talk to Walter. Walter was her first love, a childhood neighbor who had been a lawyer for decades and now lived alone in an apartment full of old papers and memories. She sought him out without telling him much. "Walter, how can I find out if someone is using my name for strange things? Are you in trouble?" "Ellie, no, but I feel like my son isn't my son anymore." Walter looked at her carefully, asked for the few papers she had, and for weeks reviewed movements, documents, and transfers, until one night he invited her to his house. "Ellie, your son put you as a guarantor on a joint account. You didn't sign anything, but the signature is there. But I don't know how to write more than my name. They forged your signature, and they've been taking money out little by little for 6 months. Ellie said nothing. She took the papers, put them in her purse, and left in silence. That night, the pain didn't let her sleep, not because of the money, but because of the truth. Her son hadn't just been manipulated, he had become an active part of the betrayal. He robbed his own mother. In the following days, Tanya and Rhonda organized the trip to Rome. Jackson, without a stable job, sold his car and then suggested using Ellie's savings. "It's family money," Tanya said. "Besides, your mother isn't going to use it." "Don't be silly." "I don't know. It's everything she has. And why is she hoarding it? You're her son. You're not stealing it. You're just borrowing it early." Jackson hesitated. But he did it. One night, from his home computer, he transferred all the money. He did it quickly, without much thought, like someone wanting to pull out a tooth without anesthesia. He finished, took a deep breath, closed the laptop, and didn't look back. Ellie discovered the betrayal the next day. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just wrote a sentence in her notebook. "My son didn't die, but the mother in me did." From then on, everything changed. Her body kept aging, but her spirit hardened. She began to walk differently, her back straighter. She started making calls, checking emails, visiting offices. Something was being prepared. While in Rome, Jackson walked the stone streets, believing he had won something. In South Central Los Angeles, his mother was weaving the web that would return everything they had taken from her. And Tanya was already planning how to disappear without a trace. What Jackson didn't know was that Ellie was no longer the woman he remembered. That woman had died. In her place remained a wounded mother, but an alert one. And when a wounded mother awakens, there is no hell she is unwilling to cross. The betrayal no longer hurt. What hurt was the certainty of having been invisible, of having been used, of having been erased as if she had never mattered. But Ellie was not willing to disappear in silence. Because what mothers keep quiet about can also kill. Ellie said nothing. Not that time, nor the next, nor the one after. Her silence was no longer the kind that bleeds inside. It was a sharp silence, one that observes, registers, and calculates. The words dried up in her throat as if they no longer made sense. Because when a mother understands that she has been replaced by a mask, she no longer screams. She transforms. Jackson didn't notice the difference, or he didn't want to notice it. He was too busy living the life he had dreamed of, a life that didn't smell like fresh laundry or coffee, a life where the voice that woke him up didn't say, "My baby boy," but "Sir," a clean, elegant, and empty life. Tanya settled into his world as if she had always been its owner, and he, enchanted, let her. He was fascinated by how she spoke with words Ellie never used, how she walked gracefully in high heels, how she referred to things as if everything belonged to her. But behind her easy laugh and filtered photos was a subtle, cruel, and precise machine. Tanya knew what she wanted, and she wanted it fast. A name, a surname, an account, and a man who could sustain her facade. The first comments came disguised as jokes. Honey, why does your mother always have to have an opinion on everything? I don't want our child to grow up surrounded by poverty-level thinking, she said while doing her nails in the living room. Jackson let out an uncomfortable laugh. It's not that she wants to have an opinion. It's just hard for her to let go of control. She's always been like that. It's not control. It's pity disguised as love. Women like your mother think they're martyrs for raising kids alone, but they don't realize that the past doesn't give us the right to drag others down. I don't want that for you, or for me, or for our children. Little by little, Tanya began deciding when they could visit Ellie and when they couldn't. First, it was that they were busy. Then, that it was better to meet in public places. And finally, that she didn't feel comfortable entering Ellie's house because it smelled musty. Jackson accepted everything, and every time Ellie asked why they didn't visit her as often, he lowered his head. We have too many things going on. Mom, work, wedding things. Ellie only nodded, but there was no longer any naivety in her eyes. She was starting to put pieces together, like someone hand-stitching a torn sack. Rhonda, Tanya's mother, didn't take long to get involved. Never with blatant insults, but always with carefully chosen phrases to sound educated, but with just the right edge to hurt. Miss Eleanor, I apologize if I'm direct, but didn't you ever think about moving to a more decent neighborhood, You're older now. This area isn't safe for someone your age, and with that money you have saved, you could buy something better, right? Ellie looked Rhonda in the eye. She didn't blink, didn't say anything, but something inside her crunched. That day, she understood that it wasn't that they wanted her far away. It was that they never wanted her close. One Sunday during a family lunch organized by Tanya, Ellie decided to speak to her son. She waited for the moment Rhonda went to the restroom and Tanya was distracted by her phone. She looked at Jackson with the same love as always, but her voice no longer trembled. Son, are you sure this woman is right for you? Have you noticed how she looks at you when you're not looking? How she talks about me? Jackson swallowed. Tanya looked up from her phone. Rhonda had just come out of the restroom. The atmosphere shifted like when a storm rolls in. And then Jackson exploded. That's enough. Mom, you're jealous because I have another woman in my life now. You won't say it, but you think it. You never stood for anyone else being important to me. Ellie didn't defend herself. She didn't even flinch. She just lowered her gaze to her plate, put down her fork, and in that silence, she knew she had lost him. When they said goodbye that afternoon, no one hugged her. Upon arriving home, she carefully took off her shoes as if she didn't want to bother anyone, even though she was alone. She sat on her bed and thought about the last time her son had said, "I love you," without her asking him to. She couldn't remember. The following weeks were a hell disguised as routine. Tanya and Rhonda began to visit Jackson more at his office. They brought him lunch, talked business, and suggested investments. One day, Tanya asked for access to his account so she could better organize household expenses. "Trust me," she said, taking off her shirt in front of him. Or are we not a team, Jackson, trapped between lust and foolishness? Said yes, as always. Ellie, meanwhile, didn't stay still. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't know how to prove it. That's when she reached out to her neighbor, Brenda, a woman who had been an accountant for 20 years at a pharmaceutical company and was now retired, teaching neighborhood children to add and subtract. "Brenda, I need you to explain something to me. How can I tell if someone is messing with my accounts?" Brenda frowned. "Your son?" "Yes. Do you have access to your bank statements? They don't come to me anymore. And transfers? I've never made one. I don't even know how to do that." For several nights, Brenda taught Ellie how to access the bank portal on her cell phone, how to review movements, and how to identify deposits and withdrawals. The first time she saw the list of transactions, Ellie felt the world falling on her. Large amounts, recent dates, transfers that coincided with the days Jackson visited or asked for some document, money leaving without explanation. He had access. He asked me for it to do some paperwork. He said it was for insurance. Ellie, it's not paperwork. It's theft. Her heart broke in too, but she didn't cry. Instead, she asked for a notebook and began writing down every single transaction, day, time, amount. Every dollar stolen had a name attached to it. One Friday night, when everything seemed lost, Brenda showed her something else. "See this transaction? They signed your name here to activate a joint account, but the signature isn't yours. It's a crude copy." Ellie touched the screen as if touching an open wound. They didn't even bother to hide it. Music. "What are you going to do?" Ellie closed her phone, took a deep breath, and said, "Nothing. Not yet." Meanwhile, in Rome, Jackson began to feel uneasy, not from guilt, but because Tanya no longer looked at him the same way. She had changed. She no longer kissed him with enthusiasm. She spent hours on her phone laughing to herself. And Rhonda no longer bothered to pretend she tolerated him. One night, he heard a conversation between them while pretending to sleep. "It's done. Why keep pretending? As soon as we get back, we're selling everything and ditching him. And if he finds out, he's slow. He won't even notice. And if he does, so what, the old lady is going to die anyway. Who is going to defend him?" Ellie from Los Angeles began to move with precision. She visited a bank office, requested the complete statements, printed them, and put them in envelopes. Then she went to the public registry to ask if there were properties under her name that she didn't remember signing. There she discovered something even worse. Jackson had tried to register her house as a shared investment property using altered documents. He didn't succeed due to a technical error, but he had tried. That day, Ellie didn't go straight home. She walked to an old church at the back of the neighborhood. Not to pray, just to sit on the bench and look at the altar. Give me patience, God, not to forgive him, but not to destroy him with my own hands. Silence enveloped her. When she returned, she turned on the radio, played a blues song, and began to knit. But what she was knitting wasn't clothing. It was revenge. The seeds of ingratitude were already sown, and they were germinating. The harvest was near. Ellie knew it. She felt it in her bones, in the way the wind blew through the cracks in the door, as if coming to warn her that everything that had been buried in silence would soon sprout. The pre-dawn hours weighed less on her. The cold no longer bothered her. She just counted the days, not with anxiety, but with strategy, with calmness, like someone sharpening a knife slowly, knowing they will use it at the exact moment. One morning, while sweeping the living room with the old straw broom that had lasted so long. She decided to move the armchair to clean underneath. Beneath it were dirt, tiny papers, a dry pen, and a torn, badly folded white envelope tucked into a recycled plastic bag. She was going to throw it all away without looking, but something inside her screamed at her to check. First, she opened the bag. Inside was a document. She read it twice without fully understanding what it said. It listed her full name, her address, and a signature similar to hers. Then she read the header, Last Will and Testament. She felt something squeeze her chest. She sat on the floor with the document spread out on her legs and read it again. It was a will where she supposedly ceded her house and savings to Jackson in case of her death. And at the bottom, a signature, her signature forged. She felt the silence of the house way more than ever. Only the clocks ticking and the distant barking of a dog broke the quiet. She didn't cry. She wasn't surprised. But this time something did break inside her. It wasn't the betrayal. It was the confirmation. She called Walter. Come over. What happened? I found what you needed to see. 2 hours later, Walter was sitting in her kitchen with the document in hand. He read it carefully, shaking his head in negation. This is not only illegal, it's dangerous. If he had filed it, you could have lost the house without ever knowing. Do you think it was him Walter stayed silent? He placed the paper on the table. This isn't your signature, Ellie, and you have no idea how to draft a will. It's obviously not yours. The most serious part is that this is a draft, and if there's a draft, there may have been a real attempt to file it. Ellie stared at her own wrinkled hands, stained by the years, but still steady. She remembered the day she finally made the last mortgage payment on the house. 30 years of effort, reheated meals, broken shoes, working in the hottest days, cleaning up other people's messes, enduring bosses' shouts, all to have something of her own, something no one could take away. He wanted to kill me on paper, she said without raising her voice. Walter looked up. He didn't know if it was a metaphor or a literal truth. The silence between them was so long that the boiling of the coffee on the stove became the only sound in the kitchen. And now, what are you going to do? Ellie smiled, the same smile Jackson didn't know how to read in time. Now, I'm going to bury him, but awake. Not even 3 days had passed since that discovery when she received an unexpected call from Dr. Evans, the internist at the health clinic, where Ellie had occasional checkups. I need you to come in, Miss Eleanor, today if you can. She felt her legs tremble. She walked to the medical center with the same dignity with which she had faced everything in her life. She entered the office in her usual clothing, her scarf tied tight, and the notebook where she wrote down every pill. The doctor greeted her kindly, but without hope. In his gaze was a compassion that smelled of farewell. We did new blood tests, and the results are not good. She didn't respond. She just looked at him expecting what she already knew. You have leukemia, ma'am. It's in an advanced stage. It pains me to tell you this way, but there's no time for pleasantries. Your immune system is compromised. We estimate you have about 6 months. Ellie froze. She stared at a fixed point on the wall, a small bird-shaped patch of dampness. Not a single tear, not a single question. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understand how much it costs me to die with dignity. The doctor shifted uncomfortably in his seat. There are options. We can start chemotherapy, but it's not certain you'll respond. The treatment is aggressive and expensive. Does it take my life faster? Not necessarily. Then no. I don't like the thought of death catching me in a gown. The doctor didn't know what to say. He had never seen anyone take the news of their own death with such composure. Ellie stood up, took her purse, and before leaving the office, she turned to him. 6 months is enough. For what I have to do, it's more than enough. She walked back home not because she couldn't afford a ride, but because she needed to feel the city. She wanted every step to take her back to her roots, her history, her purpose. She crossed the street where she was once almost hit by a car while taking Jackson to preschool. She passed the market where she worked cleaning restrooms for $40 a day. She waved to Mr. Theodore, the juice stand man, who had no teeth but a good memory. When she arrived home, she went straight to her room. She pulled out a wooden box hidden under the bed. Inside was her notebook with notes, clippings, receipts, unsent letters, and an old envelope where she kept the only photo she had of Jackson as a child when he still slept hugging her leg. She looked at it for a long time, then turned on the stove, put water to boil, and as the steam rose, she murmured to herself, "No more praying now. The work begins." The first thing she did was go with Walter to file a preemptive complaint, not as a mother, but as a citizen. They reported the forgery of her signature, the attempt to appropriate property, and attached the evidence. Then they requested the temporary freezing of the bank account from which Jackson had withdrawn the money. To achieve this, they used a clause that allowed the stopping of financial movements if elder financial abuse was suspected. It wasn't easy, but Walter knew the loopholes. He had lost faith in the law years ago. But for Ellie, he was willing to dust off his profession. "Are you ready for what's coming?" he asked as they signed the papers. "I was born ready. I just didn't know it." After that, Ellie went to the store, bought a new notebook bound in red, and started writing what would be her final log. Not one for weeping, but one for documentation. On the first page, she wrote, "To my son, Jackson, I delivered you from my womb with pain. I gave you my life with love, and you ripped away my dignity without blinking. This is not revenge. It is justice, and justice is all I have left to die in peace." Meanwhile, in Rome, Jackson and Tanya continued to pretend to be happy. They uploaded daily photos, made videos with filters, and showed off plates of food they couldn't even pronounce. But the tension was growing more evident. Tanya no longer shared the bed. Rhonda spent all her time on her phone, and Jackson felt something slipping away, like an internal alarm that wouldn't stop ringing. One night, while searching his email for a flight confirmation, he found a hidden folder. It was an automatic backup of Tanya's messages with another person. At first, he thought it was spam, but when he opened it, he read what he shouldn't have. "Tanya, we almost have everything. The idiot doesn't suspect a thing. Contact and the account. Tanya, done. As soon as we get back, we're leaving him. Contact." What if he finds out Tanya? I don't care. Let him rot. I'm not staying with someone who smells like a traumatized single mom. Jackson felt his stomach drop. He closed the computer, said nothing, and pretended to sleep. But he couldn't close his eyes that night. And for the first time in a long time, he thought of his mother, of her voice, of the way she called him my little boy even when he was taller than her, of her rice pudding, of how she laughed at old black and white sitcoms, of how she touched his forehead when he was sick, and of how she used to tell him, "Nobody will ever care for you like I do." He wanted to call her, but he didn't. Ellie, for her part, expected nothing. There was no longer any tenderness in her waiting, only planning. She visited offices, made calls, and activated the immigration clause. She declared Jackson's transactions as suspicious. The system was slow, but it activated. An international alert was issued for his return to the United States. They wouldn't put him in jail, but they would make him accountable. In the red notebook, Ellie wrote, "There is no justice more complete than that which is delivered without screaming. I will watch him lose everything without lifting a finger. Karma is not paid with violence. It is served with patience." And so the second betrayal didn't break her. It converted her into something stronger, colder, freer. The mother died in her, but the woman awoke. It was only a matter of days until Jackson returned to the U.S., and he had no idea of the earthquake that was waiting for him. Jackson believed that hell was a place with fire, punishment, and screams. He didn't imagine it could be as cold as the cobblestone streets of Rome, or as humiliating as a card being declined in a restaurant full of tourists. It all started with a denial at the payment terminal, then another and another. In less than 48 hours, he found himself empty-handed. No cash, no active accounts, and with two women looking at him as if he were a beggar they had just picked up off the street. Tanya yelled at him in the middle of the street in front of dozens of people who stopped to stare. "You shameless idiot. What did you do with the money I told you not to trust your poverty-stricken mommy? Now you've screwed us all." Jackson tried to speak, but there weren't enough words to explain what he didn't even understand. He only knew something was wrong, that the accounts were frozen, that his name had been linked to an international financial fraud investigation, and that he had to report to the American embassy the next day. That night, Rhonda looked at him with a mixture of contempt and annoyance. "I warned you, Tanya. This poor boy isn't even good for washing dishes. I'm going to a hostel. I'm not sleeping in this dump." Tanya followed her. Not a word. Not a goodbye. Jackson stayed in the hotel room alone with a half-empty suitcase and the buzz of betrayal echoing in his ears. Meanwhile, in Los Angeles, Ellie was weaving the last threads of her plan like a winter blanket. Everything fit. Every movement made sense. Walter helped her gather the necessary documents to activate the international capital block. Relying on the complaint of fraudulent use of an elderly person's accounts, he contacted an old acquaintance of Walter's, Mr. Ernest, a federal agent in the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and managed to activate an alert for illicit fund withdrawal, which implied a mandatory review upon Jackson's entry into U.S. territory. It wasn't revenge. There was no hate. There was justice. In her red notebook, she wrote, Sometimes a mother's love also has to hurt, not out of hate, but for a lesson. Because what is allowed is repeated, and what is repeated rots. I didn't give birth to a thief, but the world turned him into one. And if I have to be the one to put the brakes on him, so be it. Brenda accompanied her in silence through many of those procedures. She was no longer just her neighbor. She had become her accomplice. Doesn't it hurt, Ellie? Of course it hurts. It hurts like tearing off my own skin. But there are pains that heal. The meeting at the embassy was a spectacle of shame for Jackson. They made him go into a cold, windowless room with a young lawyer and a translator who spoke in a mechanical tone. They explained that there was an active complaint in the U.S., that the funds had been frozen by a preemptive order, and that he had to account for them upon his return. Jackson left with a defeated face. He felt everything crumbling. He thought of his mother. For the first time in a long time, he thought of her voice, her look, and he knew that she knew that all of this came from her. And then, like a lost child, he dialed her number. "Mom," he said as soon as she answered. On the other end of the phone, Ellie was in her kitchen cleaning black-eyed peas with the old strainer as if nothing unusual were happening. She recognized the voice immediately. Her hand trembled, but not enough to drop the phone. "Mom, what did you do? They took everything from me. I'm alone." Tanya left. "Rhonda, too. They say you did this." Ellie stayed silent, took a deep breath, and then replied with a serene, firm voice, as if speaking from a place Jackson could no longer access. "I didn't take anything from you, son. I just stopped what you were taking from me. Mom, they want to arrest me. You said you would always be there for me. I was, until you stopped being there for yourself. Please help me. I don't know what to do. Learn." She hung up. She gave him nothing more. No tears, no apologies, no explanations. It was the first time she allowed herself to think that her son needed to suffer to understand, because sometimes pain teaches more than love. That night, Ellie didn't sleep, not out of anguish, but because she sat down to write him a letter. It wasn't a farewell. It was an emotional testament, a letter she would leave in the red notebook on the last page. It was for him, for when he returned. "My dearest Jackson, you were my reason for getting up every morning. You were my fight, my strength, my pride. I gave you what I had and what I didn't. I denied myself food, rest, and company for you. And I don't regret it. I did it with love. But you forgot who you were. You surrounded yourself with ghosts in expensive perfume, and in their eagerness to kill me while I was alive, they forced me to wake up. I don't hate you. I couldn't. But I am no longer the woman who waits in silence for her son to remember her. Now I am the one who teaches you, even if it hurts. And if you ever truly repent, this letter will be here. Not to save you, but so you can't say no one warned you." At the end of the letter, she drew a small heart. It was the sweetest thing she had left. Jackson wandered the streets of Rome aimlessly. He slept in cheap host. Sometimes he ate, sometimes he didn't. He had no one to call. Neither Tanya nor Rhonda answered. And he knew that his return to the U.S. wouldn't be a landing. It would be a crash. Finally, He took a return flight, scared, ashamed, with cold in his bones. He knew they were waiting for him, not with hugs, but with outstanding debts. Ellie, for her part, was ready. Her health was deteriorating, but her soul was clearer than ever. She had shaved her head before the chemo could take her hair. She did it in her bathroom with sewing scissors. She looked in the mirror and said, "Now I look like who I am." Walter accompanied her to her last doctor's appointment. The doctor confirmed that the cancer was advancing rapidly. She nodded. "You know," she said, "I was never afraid to die. What hurt me was not being able to leave in peace. But now I know I will leave with everything settled." That night in her bed alone, Ellie felt a sharp pain in her chest. She doubled over, but she didn't call anyone. She just hugged herself, murmuring her son's name, not as a complaint, but as a farewell. The silence of the storm was just that, the exact moment before the collapse, the fine calm that precedes the inevitable. But Ellie didn't fear the end because she had done what she had to do. And Jackson was about to face the debris of the life he himself destroyed. When the plane landed in the U.S., Ellie felt no emotion. She wasn't surprised by the captain's welcome or the strange language mixed with the airport announcements. She didn't care about the glass ceilings or the foreign faces. She hadn't traveled to admire anything. She had traveled to close a cycle, not as a mother, but as a witness. At almost 70 years old, her body was trembling. Yes, but not with fear. The physical pain was already part of the scenery. What sustained her was purpose. She had sold a few things to pay for that ticket: the blender, the large mirror in the living room, and a ring she kept since Jackson was a child. She didn't regret it. The cost was insignificant compared to the emotional freedom she sought. At the airport, Walter was waiting for her. He had arrived a day earlier to prepare everything. He had pulled strings, processed the permits, and arranged for Ellie to be present at the embassy when Jackson testified. It wasn't legally required, but the consular official was an old friend and also the son of a single mother. He understood the request without needing too many explanations. When he saw her arrive, Walter took off his hat. "You don't look like a woman who is about to face her son." "And you don't look like a retired lawyer," Ellie replied without looking directly at him. "Are you sure about this?" "I'm alive. That's enough." They walked to the car. During the ride, Walter tried to ease the tension with a few anecdotes, but Ellie didn't engage. She wasn't there to converse. She had one last task. In her purse, she carried a thick yellow envelope with items that weren't of material value, but held eternal weight. Meanwhile, in a hotel room on the other side of the city, Jackson stood in front of the mirror. His eyes were sunken. His beard was messy, and his expression swung between exhaustion and panic. He was going to present himself at the American embassy to sign an official declaration that would separate him from the joint accounts with his mother. But he also knew that by doing so, he would admit he had managed those accounts with false documentation. In exchange, the embassy had agreed not to arrest him, but to register him on an economic watch list, and his return to the U.S. would be conditional. He would have to present himself before a financial authority upon stepping on American soil. When he went down to the hotel lobby, he saw Tanya waiting for him. She wore dark sunglasses and a red coat that looked borrowed. Her face didn't reflect love or resentment, only convenience. "You're late," Tanya said with annoyance. "I didn't know you were coming. You also didn't know you were so useless. And here we are. What do you want to see you fall?" Jackson clenched his fists. What she said no longer hurt him. What hurt was having allowed himself to be molded by a woman who considered him disposable. Upon arriving at the embassy, the officials led them into a white, silent waiting room with metal chairs. Tanya chewed gum as if she were in a shopping mall. Jackson sweated. Every minute weighed like an hour. Then the door opened and Ellie entered. She wore a gray sweater, a long skirt, and a dark blue scarf over her shoulders. Her now sparse hair was covered with a black bandana. She walked slowly but straight. She held the yellow envelope in her hands. When she crossed the room, her eyes met Jackson's. He suddenly stood up. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I came to watch you sign." "Not as a mother, as a witness." Tanya let out a harsh laugh. "How sweet." The old woman came to put on her final show. Ellie looked at her, not with hate, but with pity. "You took everything she had," she said in a low voice. "But I taught him what he'll never have again. Forgiveness." Tanya scoffed. "Forgiveness? Ma'am, your son is a failure. You raised a parasite." "No, I raised a good boy. You turned him into this, and he let you do it." Jackson closed his eyes. He couldn't take it anymore. "Mom, I don't know when I lost myself." Ellie approached, handing him the envelope. "Here are your photos. The first one's from when you learned to walk and write. Here's your first letter to Santa Claus. Once you asked me for a bicycle, and I told you only if you got an A in math. And you did. I kept my promise, son." Jackson took the envelope, his hands trembling. "And here is also the letter I wrote you. Not to save you, but so you can't say no one warned you." They sat down. The embassy official came in and explained the procedure. Jackson signed. At that moment, the camera of an American tourist waiting for his passport recorded part of the final dialogue. The images showed Ellie standing, her eyes moist, saying, "You were my life, but I was never yours. Today, I understand it. You weren't born to love me, only to serve as my mirror." The recording was uploaded to social media that same day. In a few hours, it went viral. People commented from all over. "That mother is a queen. That's how you teach a lesson without violence. Dignity doesn't age." Jackson couldn't lift his head. The official looked at him with compassion. "All done. You can go. Your mother, too." Tanya had already left. She didn't wait for anyone. She stormed off just as she had arrived, without apology, without a soul. On the way back to the hotel, Ellie and Jackson walked in silence down a narrow street in Rome. On a corner, she stopped. "This is where we part ways." "Mom," he tried to say, but his voice broke. "I gave you everything I had, even my silence. Now I give you the only thing you refuse to accept, the truth. Will you forgive me? I already forgave you. The problem is, that you haven't forgiven yourself yet. Can I do anything? Yes. Live with what you did and make it count for something. Ellie turned and walked away slowly. She never saw him again. That night, Jackson opened the envelope in his room. The photos were yellowed, but intact. The letter, written in blue ink, smelled of lavender. When he finished reading it, the world crashed down on him. He knelt on the floor and cried as he hadn't cried since he was a child. Not from punishment, but from shame. And he knew he had lost something he couldn't recover. The dignity of a mother. Saki, and that justice, when it comes from the one who loved you most, is the hardest of all. Jackson returned to the U.S. in silence. Without suitcases, without promises, without glory. He passed through customs like a ghost. No cameras, no family waiting for him, no one asking about him. The only things he brought with him were the yellow envelope with his childhood photos and the letter his mother had left him. The rest, he had lost everything. The Los Angeles airport felt grayer than ever. The air was heavy, dense, as if his guilt floated in the atmosphere. He had nowhere to go. Tanya wasn't answering calls. His mother-in-law had blocked all his contacts, and his former office colleagues pretended not to recognize him. He had been exposed on social media, mocked by thousands, branded as the ungrateful son who stole from his mother to take his wife and mother-in-law to Europe. He walked the streets of the neighborhood where he grew up. South Central was the same. The same potholes, the same graffiti on the walls, the same street vendors selling goods at dusk. But something inside him was no longer the same. Every street had an echo, a memory, a reproach. He passed his old school. He remembered when his mother walked him hand in hand, her apron smelling of bleach and her shoes worn down. She always said, "You won't live scrubbing floors like me. You'll have your own desk and your suit." And he had it for a while, until he exchanged it for lies. Ellie was already back. She had returned alone. She didn't need company. She had lived her whole life in the company of her silence, and it didn't weigh on her. She settled back into her house with cracks in the walls, the same concrete floor, and the rocking chair that creaked when she swayed. She settled into her life like someone returning to the place they should never have left. Walter brought her medicine. Brenda prepared light soups for her. The closest neighbors looked after her in spontaneous shifts, not because she asked for it, but because dignity is also honored while one is alive. She became a neighborhood legend. Some children thought she had traveled to punish the wicked, others that she was a witch, others that she had faced the mob. Only a few knew the truth, and they said nothing. Ellie didn't speak much. She listened to blues music in the afternoons. Sometimes, from the doorway, she watched the neighborhood children play. She laughed with them. She gave them lollipops, listening intently when they told childhood lies. She had recovered her peace, but not her strength. The cancer was advancing slowly but steadily. Every week she seemed more fragile. Her clothes were too big. Her hands trembled more. But she never stopped walking around her house. She never let herself fall. One Sunday morning, Jackson walked to the door. He carried a bag with donuts. He had spent the whole night wondering if he should go. He hadn't slept or eaten, but something inside him demanded it. He didn't expect her to open the door. He just wanted to see her, to see if she was still breathing. From the opposite sidewalk, he saw her sitting in her rocking chair. She wore an old sweater and a shawl draped over her shoulders. Her face was thin, but not defeated. She smiled at some children playing nearby. One of them brought her a flower picked from the park, and she hugged him as if he were her own blood. Jackson didn't cross the street. He just watched her. He felt a knot in his throat, walked slowly, left the bag of donuts on the porch, and left. Ellie didn't look up, but she felt him. She didn't open the door. Not that day. Over the following weeks, Jackson returned, always at the same time. He left something: flowers, pastries, a note without a name. He never dared to knock. He never asked to enter. He had no right. He was just paying without knowing if the debt would ever end. One night, Ellie picked up her red notebook, opened it to the last page, and with a trembling hand, wrote her final note. It wasn't long, just enough, just like her. My son, love is not demanded, it is given, and if you have learned that, then you are not lost anymore. Don't look for me when I'm gone. I will be in every mistake you choose not to repeat, in every act of kindness you do without expecting anything in return. If you want to forgive yourself, start with others. And if you ever manage to see your mother in the eyes of another woman, don't fail her. That will be my redemption. She signed with her full name. She folded the letter, put it in an envelope, and wrote in black ink, "For Jackson." The morning she stopped breathing was bright. The sun streamed through the windows. On her lap were the red notebook, the envelope, and a blanket knitted by her own hands. The neighbors found her surrounded by flowers that the children had left. Her face held a serenity that few can fake. There was no drama, no screaming, only the calm after the storm. Walter arrived first. He looked at her in silence, gently closed her eyes. He didn't cry. He knew she didn't want tears. He knew she had died as she lived with dignity. Brenda prepared the wake with the help of the neighbors. It was humble but full of love. They didn't accept elaborate wreaths, only flowers from the park, children's drawings, and the songs she loved to listen to. Jackson wasn't notified, but he knew. He knew the moment the wind changed and something in his chest went out. He ran to the house, saw the open door, and walked in slowly. There were candles in the living room. No one stopped him. No one hugged him. He went to his mother's body. He knelt down. He touched her hands. They were cold. Next to her, he found the envelope with his name. He opened it. He read every word aloud, alone in a whisper. He cried, but not like before. He cried in silence like her. In a corner of the room was an open wooden box. Inside, a photo of him as a child with a handwritten note on the back. I still believe in you, son. Jackson took the photo, pressed it against his chest, then went out to the yard and sat in the chair where she used to sit. He looked up at the sky and understood that he had lost his mother, but perhaps he could still find himself. Days later, the neighbor said that the man who came with donuts stayed living in the house. He had no new furniture or luxuries, no visitors, only an old chair, a red notebook, and a photo on the shelf. Those who leave make space. Those who stay sometimes fill it with memory and sometimes with redemption. Did you like the story? And which city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this. Thank you so much for your sweet support. I'm looking forward to your comments on the stories. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's so much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next life story with love and respect.